The smell of burned paper reached me before I saw the flames. By the time I stepped into the courtyard, it was already too late. My younger brother, Jian, stood beside the metal barrel with a poker in his hand. My mother sat nearby beneath the awning, expressionless. My aunt poured tea as if nothing unusual was happening. Inside the barrel, black fragments twisted upward into the afternoon air. I knew exactly what had been burning. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Jian glanced at me and shrugged. It was just an old letter. The world narrowed. The sound of the street outside disappeared. The voices vanished. Even the wind seemed to stop. That letter had been the only thing my father left behind when he died. The only thing. Not property. Not money. Not shares. A single sealed letter with my name written on the front. I had protected it for 14 years. And now it was ash. What did you do? My voice came out quieter than I expected. Jian laughed. The sound struck harder than a slap. Come on, brother. You kept treating it like some sacred treasure. My aunt clicked her tongue. He was gone for 14 years. Whatever was inside couldn't matter anymore. I stared at the black flakes rising into the sky. Something inside my chest tightened. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. Loss. The kind that arrives when there is nothing left to save. My mother finally spoke. You are overreacting. I looked at her. The woman who had once cried over my father's photograph every night for years. Now her face showed only irritation. It belonged to father. So. The word landed like a stone. So. Just so. As though 14 years of grief could be reduced to a single syllable. Jian tossed the poker into the barrel. It's done. Stop making a scene. A scene. I looked into the fire. And then I saw it. Near the bottom. One corner hadn't completely burned. A fragment. Small. Half blackened. Half intact. Without thinking, I reached into the barrel. He bit into my fingers. Someone shouted. I ignored them. I pulled the fragment free. Only a few words remained visible. Key. Long River Foundation. Truth. The rest had become charcoal. My heart stopped. The Long River Foundation. I knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. It was one of the largest private charitable foundations in the province. Worth billions. My father's name had never been connected to it. Not once. Yet there it was, written in his own handwriting. My fingers trembled. Jian noticed. What is it? I folded the fragment immediately. Nothing. For the first time all afternoon, I saw uncertainty cross his face. That night, I couldn't sleep. The burned fragment sat on my desk. I studied it until dawn. The handwriting was unquestionably my father's. The paper was original. And beneath the scorch marks, I discovered something else. Numbers. Coordinates. Not complete, but enough. By sunrise, I was already driving across the city. I told nobody where I was going. Nobody asked. That hurt more than I expected. Years earlier, I would have explained everything. Years earlier, they would have pretended to care. Now it all stopped lying. The coordinates led me to an old bank. The building was nearly forgotten. A relic from another era. Inside, an elderly manager listened carefully as I explained. When I showed him the fragment, his expression changed immediately. Please wait here. He disappeared. 20 minutes later, he returned with another man. Older, sharply dressed. The kind of person whose authority required no introduction. He studied me for a long moment. Then he asked a single question. Are you Wei Chen? My throat tightened. Yes. The man inhaled slowly. We have been searching for you for 13 years. The room went silent. What? He opened a leather folder. Inside was a photograph. My father, much younger, standing beside 3 other men. The older gentleman touched the picture carefully. Your father was one of the founders. I stared at him. Founders of what? The Long River Foundation. My mind refused to process the words. That was impossible. My father had died driving a delivery truck. He worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. We had never been wealthy. We had struggled constantly. Founders didn't live like that. The man seemed to read my thoughts. He left before the foundation became what it is today. Why? The man looked away. For the first time, sadness entered his face. Because he discovered corruption. My pulse accelerated. The room suddenly felt smaller. He intended to expose it. What happened? The man's silence lasted several seconds. Your father died 3 months later. I stared at him. Neither of us spoke. A terrible possibility formed in my mind. The man continued carefully. We never proved anything. The words sounded rehearsed. Perhaps he had spoken them to himself for years. He slid another document across the table. This belongs to you. Inside was a key. Old. Bronze. Heavy. The word from the burned letter. Key. My father's key. My hand shook. What does it open? The man met my eyes. His archive. I sat frozen. An archive. Evidence. Records. Secrets. A lifetime hidden behind a locked door. The man leaned forward. Your father instructed us to deliver it only if you arrived carrying part of the original letter. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because the alternative was breaking apart. The letter. The one my family had burned. The only reason I was here at all. If they hadn't destroyed it, I might never have looked closely enough to find the coordinates. The realization left me cold. Sometimes destruction revealed what preservation never could. The archive was located outside the city. An abandoned warehouse. By noon I was standing before a steel door. The bronze key fit perfectly. When the lock opened, dust drifted through the sunlight. Inside were filing cabinets. Boxes. Photographs. Documents. Thousands of pages. My father's life. My father's war. I spent hours reading. Then hours became longer. The deeper I went, the worse it became. Financial records. Shell companies. Illegal transfers. Bribery. Names. Dates. Evidence. Enough evidence to destroy powerful people. Enough evidence to explain why my father had lived cautiously during his final years. Enough evidence to explain why he had left that letter. Near sunset, I found a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front. The handwriting almost broke me. For a long time, I simply stared. Then I opened it. Inside was a single page. Wait, if you were reading this, something happened to the first letter. Maybe it was lost. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe someone decided your father's final words were unimportant. People often destroy things they do not understand. Do not hate them for it. Pity them. I never wanted this burden for you. But truth ignored becomes inheritance. And inheritance eventually finds its owner. You owe nobody your life. Not family. Not obligation. Not guilt. If the day comes when they ask you to sacrifice yourself endlessly, remember this. Love offered freely is a gift. Love demanded endlessly is a debt trap. Walk away if you must. I would rather lose your presence than watch you lose yourself. Dad! The page blurred. I didn't realize tears had fallen until droplets struck the paper. For years, I had carried resentment. Toward death. Toward fate. Toward every unanswered question. Now, for the first time, I heard my father's voice again. Not from memory. From him. Directly. Across 14 years. I sat alone in the fading light. The warehouse felt strangely peaceful. Outside, the city continued moving. Traffic. Business. Arguments. Ambition. Inside, there was only silence. And truth. My phone began vibrating. Once. Twice. Again. Mother. Then Jian. Then my aunt. Over and over. I finally answered. Jian spoke first. Where are you? I remained silent. Did you find something? Still silent. His breathing changed. Fear. For the first time, I heard fear. Brother? I looked around the warehouse. At everything my father had hidden. At everything he had protected. At everything my family had nearly destroyed through carelessness. No. My voice was calm. I found myself. What does that mean? I ended the call. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. Darkness slowly filled the warehouse. I sat there until the last sunlight disappeared. For years, I had been the one who solved problems. Paid debts. Mediated arguments. Covered mistakes. Absorbed blame. Whenever someone in the family fell, I rushed to catch them. I called it responsibility. My father would have called it something else. Fear. Fear of disappointing people who had stopped appreciating sacrifice long ago. The realization hurt. Because it was true, I looked at his final letter again. Then I folded it carefully. Outside, the first stars appeared. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not revenge. Not punishment. Not confrontation. Distance. I would stop carrying people who refused to walk. I would stop protecting people who burned what they did not value. I would stop offering pieces of myself to those who only noticed my absence when the giving stopped. The decision felt terrifying and freeing. I stood, locked the archive, placed the key in my pocket. Then I walked toward the night. Behind me lay my father's secrets. Ahead lay a life nobody expected me to choose. A life beyond obligation. A life beyond guilt. A life beyond them. Some truths arrive like lightning. Others arrive quietly. And once seen, they make returning impossible. The people who demand endless sacrifice are often the people who value it least. That night, for the first time in 14 years, I chose a different path. I returned home after midnight. The house was dark except for the living room. A lamp glowed beside the sofa. My mother was waiting. She sat upright, hands folded together, her expression unreadable. For years, that posture had been enough to make me nervous. Not anymore. The moment I stepped through the door, she looked up. "Where were you?" I removed my shoes calmly. "Out." Her eyebrows tightened. "Out where?" I didn't answer. The silence unsettled her. Usually I explained everything. Usually I softened every conversation. Usually I made things easy. Tonight, I walked toward the stairs. "Chun." I stopped. Not because she ordered me to. Because old habits don't disappear in a single day. I turned. "What?" The word seemed to surprise her. I almost never spoke to her that way. Not disrespectfully. Simply directly. For years, I had wrapped every sentence in caution, as though honesty might break something fragile. Now I realized that fragility had existed only on one side. She stared at me, then finally said what she truly wanted to ask. "Did you find something connected to your father?" There it was. Not concern, not apology, curiosity. I looked at her carefully. For the first time, I noticed how much distance had grown between us. Not overnight, not suddenly, slowly, year after year. One disappointment at a time. One dismissal at a time. One sacrifice at a time. No, the lie came easily. She studied my face, trying to decide whether she believed me. Then she sighed. "You're still upset about the letter. Still upset. As if grief had an expiration date. As if some losses became acceptable simply because other people were tired of hearing about them." I nodded once, then went upstairs. She didn't stop me. That bothered me more than it should have, because a small part of me had wanted her to. A small, childish part. The son who still hoped she might say, "I'm sorry." Instead, I closed my bedroom door behind me, and the house fell silent. The next morning began with shouting. Not mine. Jian's. I heard him arguing downstairs before breakfast. The sound carried through the walls. "What do you mean declined?" A pause. Then louder. "How can it decline now?" I walked downstairs slowly. Jian stood in the kitchen with his phone pressed against his ear. His face had turned pale. My aunt sat nearby. Mother looked worried. The moment Jian saw me, his expression changed. Not guilt. Expectation. He expected me to solve it. Just like always. I sat down. Poured tea. Said nothing. Jian ended the call. They rejected the loan. My aunt frowned. "What loan?" "The expansion loan." He rubbed his forehead. "The bank approved it 2 weeks ago." Mother looked confused. "Then why reject it now?" They changed their decision. His eyes drifted toward me instinctively, almost unconsciously, because for years I had relationships inside the banking industry. Professional contacts, former clients, people willing to answer calls, people willing to help, people willing to take risks because I had spent years building trust. Jian finally spoke. "Can you make a few calls?" There it was. I took a sip of tea. The silence stretched. His confusion grew. "Brother?" Another sip. His impatience surfaced. "Did you hear me?" "Yes." Then, I placed the cup down carefully. "No." The room froze. Jian blinked. "What?" "No." My aunt laughed awkwardly. "Don't joke." "I'm not joking." The words landed heavily. Nobody spoke. For years I had never refused. Not once. Even when helping cost me money. Even when helping cost me time. Even when helping cost me opportunities. I always said yes. Always. The realization was uncomfortable. Not because I felt guilty. Because I finally understood how abnormal that had been. Jian stared at me. You won't help. You own the company. That's not the point. It seems exactly like the point. His face darkened. Mother intervened. Chun, it's family. I looked at her. Yes. Nothing more. No argument. No explanation. No anger. Just yes. The simplicity frustrated them, because they couldn't fight a battle I wasn't willing to join. Finally, Jian slammed his hand against the table. Fine. He stormed out. The front door shook. Silence followed. My aunt looked offended. Mother looked disappointed. I finished my tea, then left for work. The archive consumed every free moment. Each evening, I returned to the warehouse. Each night, I reviewed documents. The deeper I dug, the more complicated everything became. The corruption my father had uncovered wasn't isolated. It spread through multiple companies, multiple charities, multiple public projects. Some names still held power today. Others had disappeared. A few were dead. One name appeared repeatedly. Lu Zhan. I didn't recognize it initially. Then one evening I froze. The current chairman of Long River Foundation, one of the city's most respected figures. His photograph appeared regularly in newspapers. Philanthropist, business leader, community benefactor. My father had mentioned him dozens of times. Never positively. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Money moved. Records vanished. Witnesses changed statements. Projects collapsed. And somehow Lu Zhan always benefited. Yet no direct evidence existed. Only fragments. Enough to create suspicion. Not enough to prove guilt. I leaned back in my chair. Frustration built inside me. My father had spent years collecting evidence. And even now, the final connection remained hidden. A knock interrupted my thoughts. I stood immediately. Nobody should have known about the warehouse. Another knock. Slow. Patient. I opened the door cautiously. An elderly woman stood outside. Perhaps 70. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. She looked directly at me. You're Wei Chun. Not a question. A statement. I nodded. She smiled sadly. You look like him. The air seemed to leave my lungs. Who are you? The woman extended a hand. Lin Mei Yu. The name meant nothing. Then she added, I worked with your father. Everything changed. We sat inside the warehouse. Rain tapped softly against the roof. The old woman moved through the archive with familiarity. She knew where documents were stored, which cabinets mattered, which records were important. That alone told me enough. You've been here before. Many times. She ran her fingers along a filing cabinet. Your father trusted very few people. Did he trust you? A smile appeared. He trusted me to argue with him. For the first time, I laughed. The sound surprised both of us. Then her expression softened. He will be happy you found this place. I looked away. I almost didn't. She nodded. Fate rarely arrives politely. For 2 hours we talked. About my father. About the foundation. About the years before his death. Some stories made me smile. Others made me angry. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think he was killed? Silence. Rain continued tapping overhead. Finally she spoke. I think your father frightened powerful people. Not an answer, but enough. She reached into her bag, removed a folder, and slid it toward me. I kept copies. My pulse quickened. Copies of what? Insurance. Inside were records I had never seen. Meeting transcripts. Private notes. Financial reports. One document immediately caught my attention. A board meeting held 2 months before my father's death. Several pages were highlighted. One name appeared repeatedly. Lu Zhan. I looked up sharply. Lin Mei Yu nodded. Keep reading. I did, and my blood ran cold, because hidden among the minutes was evidence of something else. Not financial fraud. Identity manipulation. Someone had altered ownership records. Someone had erased a founding member. Someone had removed a name. My father's name. I looked up. What is this? Lin Mei Yu's expression hardened. The first theft. The first. She nodded. They stole his legacy before they stole anything else. The warehouse suddenly felt much colder. For years I believed my father had left voluntarily. The records suggested otherwise. He had been pushed out, erased, buried. Then history had been rewritten. I sat motionless. A strange calm settled over me. The kind that appears before a storm. Not rage. Not yet. Understanding. Slow. Precise. Dangerous. Lin Meiyu watched carefully, perhaps expecting anger, perhaps expecting immediate action. Instead, I closed the folder. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at the documents, then at the darkness beyond the warehouse door. Nothing. Her eyebrows rose. I continued. "Not yet," because for the first time in my life, I understood something important. Acting immediately wasn't always strength. Sometimes patience revealed more than confrontation ever could. Sometimes stepping back exposed truths people worked desperately to hide. Lin Meiyu studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You really are his son." The next week brought another surprise. Not from the archive, from home. I returned one evening to find Jian waiting outside my apartment building. His car was parked illegally, a sign he was desperate. The moment he saw me, he hurried forward. "Brother." I remained still. He forced a smile. "We should talk." I almost declined. Then curiosity won. We entered a nearby cafe. For several minutes, he spoke casually. Weather, work, old memories. None of it mattered. Eventually, he reached the real reason. "The company has cash flow problems." I said nothing. He swallowed. "The bank situation became worse." Still nothing. He leaned forward. "I need your guarantee." There it was. Not a conversation. A request. No, a demand disguised as a request. For years, I had guaranteed his risks. Signed documents. Used my reputation. Protected his mistakes. Each time he promised, it was temporary. Each time the cycle repeated. I looked at him quietly. The silence became unbearable. Finally, he asked, "Will you do it?" I remember my father's letter. "Love demanded endlessly is a debt trap." No. The word landed between us. Simple. Final. Jian stared, as though hearing a foreign language. "You don't understand." "I do. You'll barely be affected." That sentence changed everything. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. He genuinely believed my sacrifices mattered less than his convenience. For years, he had believed it, and I had taught him to. Every act of rescue teaches someone they never need to save themselves. The realization hurt. Because I shared responsibility. I had enabled this. I had built this expectation. Now I was dismantling it, one refusal at a time. Jian's frustration erupted. "You've changed." "Yes." "Since that stupid letter." I stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor. His expression immediately shifted. Regret. Too late. Far too late. I looked down at him. For the first time in years, not as a caretaker, not as a protector, simply as a man making his own choices. Then I walked away. Behind me, Jian called my name. I didn't turn around. For the first time, I let the consequences belong to their owner. And somewhere deep inside, a door that had remained locked for years finally opened. The next morning, a call arrived from Lin Meiyu. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Wei, what happened?" A pause. Then, "I found the missing witness." Every muscle in my body tightened. "The witness from your father's final investigation." I stood immediately. "Where is he?" "That's the problem." Silence. And she spoke the words that changed everything. "Someone found him first." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The warehouse around me felt suddenly smaller. "Someone found him first?" Lin Meiyu's voice remained calm, but I could hear tension beneath it. "Yes." "Who?" "I don't know." That answer bothered me more than I expected. Lin Meiyu wasn't careless. If she sounded worried, there was a reason. "When?" "This morning." I grabbed my jacket immediately. "Where are you?" "At the witness's apartment." "I'm coming." The line disconnected. I was already moving. The apartment building sat in one of the older districts of the city. Weathered concrete, narrow stairways. A neighborhood slowly being swallowed by redevelopment. Police vehicles were parked outside. Not many, but enough. I spotted Lin Meiyu standing across the street. She wore a dark coat despite the warm weather. The moment she saw me, her expression hardened. "You're here. What happened?" She nodded toward the building. "The witness is alive." Relief arrived so quickly it almost made me dizzy. Then I noticed her face. The concern remained. "Then what's wrong?" "He disappeared." I frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't." We crossed the street together. Near the entrance stood a middle-aged police officer. Lin Meiyu clearly knew him. After a brief conversation, he allowed us inside. The witness's apartment looked untouched. No signs of violence. No forced entry. No struggle, which somehow made everything worse. Because it suggested cooperation. Or fear. A table stood near the window. A cup of tea remained half-finished. Beside it lay a newspaper. And beside that, a photograph. I stepped closer. The image showed 4 men standing together. One of them was my father. My pulse accelerated. The second was Lu Zhan. The third was unfamiliar. The fourth had been scratched out. Deliberately. Repeatedly. As if someone wanted the face erased. The officer noticed my attention. Interesting, isn't it? I nodded. When was this found? This morning. The officer folded his arms. The witness vanished sometime during the night. Any leads? Very few. His eyes drifted toward the scratched-out face. But whoever removed him from the picture wanted people asking questions. The statement lingered in my mind. Because he was right. If someone intended to hide evidence, they could have taken a photograph. Instead, they left it behind. Almost like a message. Or a warning. 2 hours later, I sat inside the warehouse, staring at copies of the photograph. Lin Meiyu sat across from me. Neither of us had spoken for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. What are you thinking? I tapped the scratched-out figure. This person matters. Obviously. No. I looked up. I mean more than we realize. She leaned forward. I continued. If someone wanted to eliminate evidence, they would remove the picture. She nodded slowly. But they didn't. Exactly. The warehouse fell quiet again. Then a possibility emerged. A dangerous one. What if the missing witness wasn't the target? Lin Meiyu's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I pointed at the damaged face. What if this person is? For a moment, neither of us moved. Then understanding appeared on her face. The witness wasn't the secret. The witness knew the secret. A subtle but important difference. The distinction changed everything. That evening I returned home. The atmosphere felt different immediately. Tense. Heavy. The front door stood slightly open. Voices drifted from inside. Raised voices. Angry voices. I entered quietly. Mother and Jian were arguing. Not unusual. What was unusual was the panic. Jian paced across the living room. His tie hung loose around his neck. His face looked exhausted. The moment he saw me, he stopped. A strange expression crossed his face. Hope. Again. Always hope. Hope that I would rescue him. Fix it. Carry it. Absorb it. The familiar pattern. Only this time, I wasn't participating. Brother. I nodded once. Nothing more. He hesitated, then spoke. The company lost another investor. I removed my jacket, still silent. His frustration appeared almost immediately. You weren't even going to ask what happened. No. The answer stunned him. Mother looked equally surprised. I walked toward the kitchen. Behind me, Jian followed. Do you know how serious this is? I opened the refrigerator. Yes. Then why don't you care? That question stopped me. Slowly, I closed the door, then turned around. For years, I would have defended myself, explained myself, justified myself. Tonight, I simply answered, I do care. His expression softened slightly. Then I continued, I just don't think it's my responsibility. The softness vanished instantly. The truth often does that. Jian stared as though I had betrayed him. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had protected him from consequences. Now that I stopped, he called it betrayal. Perhaps because some people mistake dependency for love. The realization was uncomfortable. Not because it hurt, because it explained so much. Mother finally intervened. Chun. I looked at her. Her voice lowered. Your brother needs help. I nodded. Then he should find a solution. Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles after a truth nobody wants to hear. I left the kitchen. No arguments. No anger. No shouting. Just distance. Behind me, I heard Jian curse under his breath. For the first time, I didn't turn back. 3 days later, the company crisis worsened. I learned this not because Jian told me, because the entire city started talking about it. His business had expanded aggressively. Too aggressively. Several projects depended on financing that no longer existed. Suppliers grew nervous. Partners became cautious. Investors began asking questions. The cracks were finally visible. What surprised me wasn't the collapse. It was how quickly everything happened once I stopped holding pieces together behind the scenes. For years, I had quietly solved problems nobody noticed. Introductions, negotiations, recommendations, damage control, invisible work. The kind people only appreciate after it disappears. Now, those supports were gone, and the structure was revealing its true strength, or lack of it. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing. My father had understood that. Only now was I beginning to understand it too. Sharp eyes. She looked directly at me. Your Wei Chun. Not a question. A statement. I nodded. She smiled sadly. You look like him. The air seemed to leave my lungs. Who are you? The woman extended a hand. Lin Mei Yu. The name meant nothing. Then she added, I worked with your father. Everything changed. We sat inside the warehouse. Rain tapped softly against the roof. The old woman moved through the archive with familiarity. She knew where documents were stored, which cabinets mattered, which records were important. That alone told me enough. You've been here before. Many times. She ran her fingers along a filing cabinet. Your father trusted very few people. Did he trust you? A smile appeared. He trusted me to argue with him. For the first time, I laughed. The sound surprised both of us. Then her expression softened. He will be happy you found this place. I looked away. I almost didn't. She nodded. Fate rarely arrives politely. For 2 hours we talked. About my father. About the foundation. About the years before his death. Some stories made me smile. Others made me angry. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think he was killed? Silence. Rain continued tapping overhead. Finally she spoke. I think your father frightened powerful people. Not an answer. But enough. She reached into her bag, removed a folder, and slid it toward me. I kept copies. My pulse quickened. Copies of what? Insurance. Inside were records I had never seen. Meeting transcripts. Private notes. Financial reports. One document immediately caught my attention. A board meeting held 2 months before my father's death. Several pages were highlighted. One name appeared repeatedly. Lu Zhen. I looked up sharply. Lin Mei Yu nodded. Keep reading. I did, and my blood ran cold, because hidden among the minutes was evidence of something else. Not financial fraud. Identity manipulation. Someone had altered ownership records. Someone had erased a founding member. Someone had removed a name. My father's name. I looked up. What is this? Lin Mei Yu's expression hardened. The first theft. The first. She nodded. They stole his legacy before they stole anything else. The warehouse suddenly felt much colder. For years, I believed my father had left voluntarily. The records suggested otherwise. He had been pushed out, erased, buried. Then history had been rewritten. I sat motionless. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that appears before a storm. Not rage. Not yet. Understanding. Slow. Precise. Dangerous. Lin Mei Yu watched carefully, perhaps expecting anger, perhaps expecting immediate action. Instead, I closed the folder. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at the documents, then at the darkness beyond the warehouse door. Nothing. Her eyebrows rose. I continued. Not yet, because for the first time in my life, I understood something important. Acting immediately wasn't always strength. Sometimes patience revealed more than confrontation ever could. Sometimes stepping back exposed truths people worked desperately to hide. Lin Mei Yu studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. You really are his son. The next week brought another surprise. Not from the archive. From home. I returned one evening to find Jian waiting outside my apartment building. His car was parked illegally, a sign he was desperate. The moment he saw me, he hurried forward. Brother. I remained still. He forced a smile. We should talk. I almost declined. Then curiosity won. We entered a nearby cafe. For several minutes, he spoke casually. Weather, work, old memories. None of it mattered. Eventually, he reached the real reason. The company has cash flow problems. I said nothing. He swallowed. The bank situation became worse. Still nothing. He leaned forward. I need your guarantee. There it was. Not a conversation. A request. No. a demand disguised as a request. For years, I had guaranteed his risks, signed documents, used my reputation, protected his mistakes. Each time he promised, it was temporary. Each time the cycle repeated. I looked at him quietly. The silence became unbearable. Finally, he asked, "Will you do it?" I remember my father's letter. Love demanded endlessly is a debt trap. No. The word landed between us. Simple. Final. Jian stared, as though hearing a foreign language. "You don't understand." "I do. You'll barely be affected." That sentence changed everything. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. He genuinely believed my sacrifices mattered less than his convenience. For years, he had believed it, and I had taught him to. Every act of rescue teaches someone they never need to save themselves. The realization hurt. Because I shared responsibility, I had enabled this. I had built this expectation. Now I was dismantling it, one refusal at a time. Jian's frustration erupted. "You've changed." "Yes." "Since that stupid letter." I stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor. His expression immediately shifted. Regret. Too late. Far too late. I looked down at him. For the first time in years, not as a caretaker, not as a protector, simply as a man making his own choices. Then I walked away. Behind me, Jian called my name. I didn't turn around. For the first time, I let the consequences belong to their owner. And somewhere deep inside, a door that had remained locked for years finally opened. The next morning, a call arrived from Lin Meiyu. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Wei, what happened?" A pause. Then, "I found the missing witness." Every muscle in my body tightened. "The witness from your father's final investigation." I stood immediately. "Where is he?" "That's the problem." Silence. And she spoke the words that changed everything. "Someone found him first." I didn't sleep that night. The lawyer's words kept replaying in my head. Your father wasn't removed because of what he discovered. He was removed because of who he discovered. The distinction was terrifying. For years I had assumed this story was about money. Corruption, fraud, power. Those things were dangerous enough. But people rarely erase entire histories over stolen funds alone. People erase histories when identities are threatened, when reputations become vulnerable, when carefully constructed myths are at risk of collapsing. I sat alone in the warehouse as dawn slowly crept through the dusty windows. The archive lay open around me. Boxes, photographs, meeting records, financial statements. My father's handwriting everywhere. For the first time, I stopped looking at transactions, stopped looking at missing money, stopped looking at shell companies. Instead, I focused on people, names, relationships, timelines, connections, and gradually a different picture began to emerge. One that frightened me far more than any financial crime. Because corruption can be hidden. Identity cannot. Not forever. By noon, Lin Meiyu arrived. The moment she entered, she noticed the documents covering the table. "You found something?" I nodded. "Maybe." She sat across from me. I slid several photographs toward her. The oldest image showed 4 founders standing together. My father, Su Rong, Lu Zhen, and the 4th founder, a man named Han Guowei. The name had appeared repeatedly during the last 12 hours. Yet unlike the others, Han Guowei seemed to vanish after the foundation's earliest years. No interviews, no public appearances, no company records, almost nothing, as though he had never existed. Lin Meiyu studied the photograph. Then her expression changed. Slowly, subtly, but enough. "You know him." She remained silent. That was answer enough. I leaned forward. "Who is Han Guowei?" For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she exhaled. "He wasn't supposed to matter." The sentence immediately caught my attention. Not. I don't know. Not. I forgot. Not. He left. Instead, he wasn't supposed to matter. The wording revealed everything. Someone had intentionally minimized him. Someone had buried his role. Someone had rewritten history. I waited. Eventually, she continued. Han Guowei funded the foundation during its earliest years. An investor? No. She shook her head. A founder. I sat back slowly. Another erased founder. Another hidden name. Another missing piece. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Then she said something unexpected. He was Lu Zhen's older brother. The room went silent. I stared at her. What? She nodded. Half-brother. My mind immediately began connecting pieces. Lu Zhen. Hung Wei. Shared blood. Shared history. Shared foundation. One erased. One celebrated. Why? The question lingered between us. Then Lin Meiyu answered it. He disappeared. Again. Always disappearances. Always absences. Always missing people. When? 15 years ago. I froze. 15 years. 1 year before my father's death. The timing felt far too convenient. The next breakthrough arrived through Su Rong, or more specifically, through his medical records. The nursing home receptionist had proven unexpectedly helpful. By evening, we obtained copies of visitor logs. Most were ordinary. Family visits. Doctors. Staff. Routine interactions. Then one name appeared repeatedly. A visitor who met Su Rong every month. For 3 years. Without exception, I stared at the records. The name meant nothing at first. Then realization struck. Not because I recognized the visitor, because I recognized the address. The visitor worked for Long River Foundation. Directly, under Lu Zhen. Lin Meiyu looked equally stunned. This isn't monitoring. I nodded. No. Monitoring implies distance. This looked more personal, more deliberate. Someone had maintained contact with Su Rong for years. Which raised an obvious question. Why keep a hidden founder alive and supervised? The answer arrived before either of us spoke it. Because he knew something valuable enough to protect, or dangerous enough to contain. 2 days later, the first public crack appeared. Not in the investigation. In Lu Zhen himself. The city hosted a major charity conference. Local media attended. Business leaders attended. Politicians attended. And naturally, Lu Zhen stood at the center. Confident, respected, admired. The perfect public image. I watched the live stream from the warehouse. Not because I expected anything. Because I wanted to study him. Understand him. Observe him. Halfway through his speech, a journalist asked a simple question. A harmless question. Or at least it should have been. Chairman Liu, there has recently been renewed public interest in the Foundation's early history. Do you plan to release additional archival materials regarding the founding members? The room remained quiet. Most viewers probably missed it. I didn't. Neither did Lin Meiyu. For less than a second, Lu Zhen froze. A tiny pause. A microscopic hesitation. Then it vanished. His smile returned. His answer sounded perfect. Polished. Prepared. Controlled. Yet the hesitation remained. A crack. Small, but real. Fear leaves traces, even in experienced men, especially inexperienced men, because they know exactly what can be lost. That evening my mother called unexpectedly, not to ask for help, not to discuss Jian, not even to argue. Her voice sounded different, older, tired. Wei, yes. A long pause followed. Then, can we talk? The request surprised me. I almost said no, not from anger, from caution. Too many conversations in this family existed only when someone wanted something. Eventually, I agreed. An hour later, we sat together in a quiet tea house. Neither of us spoke immediately. The years between us seemed to occupy the empty chair. Finally, she looked down. I found something. My pulse quickened. What? She opened her purse, removed a small object, and placed it on the table. I stared. It was a photograph. Old. Faded. One I had never seen before. My father stood smiling beside another man. Not Lu Zhen. Not Su Rong. Not Han Wei. Someone else. A stranger. I looked up. Who is this? My mother's hands tightened around her teacup. I don't know. That answer felt incomplete. I waited. Eventually, she continued. Your father met him several times before he died. The tea house suddenly felt very quiet. Why didn't you tell me before? Pain crossed her face. Not dramatic pain. Not performative pain. The genuine kind. The kind people carry silently for years. Because I was afraid. I stared at her. For the first time in a long while, she looked less like a parent. More like a flawed human being. Someone who had made mistakes. Someone who had chosen avoidance over confrontation. Someone carrying regrets. What were you afraid of? She looked away, then finally answered, "That your father died because of me." The word struck harder than expected. Not because I believed them, because she did. For years, perhaps longer, the realization changed something inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Understanding. And understanding is often the first step towards seeing people clearly. Meanwhile, Jin's company entered freefall. The collapse had become impossible to hide. Projects halted. Creditors appeared. Investors demanded explanations. Employees resigned. Every week brought another problem. And every week he became more desperate. Yet something interesting happened. The more I stepped away, the more his true character surfaced. Not evil. Not malicious. Simply irresponsible. For years he had mistaken confidence for competence. And because others repeatedly protected him from consequences, he never learned the difference. Now consequences had arrived. Uninvited. Unavoidable. Educational. The irony wasn't lost on me. The person most responsible for enabling him had been me. Not entirely, but enough. A hard truth. Still a truth. The Real explosion came 5 days later. Lin Miyu burst into the warehouse carrying a folder. Her breathing was uneven, her face pale. The moment I saw her expression, I stood. "What happened?" She handed me the file. I opened it, then froze. Inside was a birth certificate. Not recent. Decades old. One name immediately stood out. Hong Wei, the erased founder, the missing brother, the hidden partner. I looked closer. Then my stomach dropped. Because the father listed on the certificate wasn't the man I expected. Neither was the family name. The document revealed something astonishing. Han Wei wasn't Lu Xun's brother. Not biologically. Not legally. Not in any official sense. The story had been fabricated. A complete lie. For years, the public narrative had hidden a far stranger truth. I looked up sharply. "What is this?" Lin Miyu swallowed, then spoke carefully. "The reason your father died." The warehouse became silent. Completely silent. I stared at the certificate, then at her, then back again. Nothing made sense until she said the name. The name hidden for 14 years. The name buried beneath foundations, companies, charities, and lies. The name nobody was supposed to uncover. Han Guowei was Lu Xun's father. My blood turned cold. Every puzzle piece shifted instantly. Every disappearance. Every erased record. Every altered document. Every destroyed history. Everything. Suddenly it fit. The celebrated founder. The hidden father. The fabricated brother. The stolen legacy. The rewritten foundation. My father hadn't discovered financial corruption. He had discovered identity fraud on a scale large enough to destroy an empire. And someone had spent 14 years making sure nobody learned the truth. Truth does not create damage. It reveals where damage already exists. For the first time, I finally understood what my father had died protecting. And somewhere in the city, the people responsible were running out of places to hide. Because once the truth begins surfacing, it rarely stops. For 14 years, my father's truth had lived in darkness. Now it was beginning to breathe. The birth certificate lay on the table between Lin Meiyu and me. Neither of us touched it. Some documents feel heavier than paper. This was one of them, because it didn't merely expose a lie. It exposed the foundation beneath every other lie. The celebrated story of Long River Foundation had always been simple. For founders built something noble. One left. One disappeared. One retired. One remained. A story clean enough to print in annual reports. Clean enough to teach at business schools. Clean enough to survive public scrutiny. Reality was different. Reality always is. The foundation's history had been rewritten to protect a secret that should never have existed. Han Guowei hadn't been Lu Xun's brother. He had been his father. And somehow, somewhere, that truth connected directly to my father's death. The question was no longer whether corruption existed. The question was how much of the city's most respected institution had been built on a deliberate fraud. And more importantly, what I intended to do about it. For several days, I did nothing, at least from the outside. No public accusations. No media leaks. No dramatic confrontations. No declarations. I simply worked, reviewed records, cross-referenced timelines, verified documents. The temptation to move quickly existed. But speed and accuracy are enemies more often than people realize. My father had spent years collecting evidence. The least I could do was respect the work. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. The farther I stepped away from my family, the more clearly I could see them, not as responsibilities, not as burdens, not as people I needed to save, simply as themselves. For the first time in years, I observed without intervening. And observation revealed things action often hides. Jian visited my apartment 3 times that week. The first time I didn't answer. The second time I wasn't home. The third time, he waited outside the building. Rain had started falling by the time I arrived. He stood beneath a streetlight. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes looked exhausted. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the confident entrepreneur who always had a plan. This was a man finally encountering limits. He saw me approaching. Relief crossed his face immediately. "Brother." I stopped. Nothing more. For several seconds, he struggled to find words. Then finally, "I need advice. Not money. Not guarantees. Not connections. Advice." The difference mattered. I remained silent. He laughed bitterly. "I know." The sound carried no anger. Only fatigue. "I deserve that." The statement surprised me. More than I expected. Because accountability had never come naturally to Jian. He looked away. Then continued. "I thought I knew what I was doing." Rain tapped softly against parked cars. Neither of us moved. Eventually, he shook his head. "I didn't." No excuses. No blame. No manipulation. Just truth. And strangely enough, truth sounded better on him than confidence ever had. I studied him carefully. The old version of me would have stepped in immediately. Taken responsibility. Solved problems. Protected him. The new version understood something different. Helping and rescuing are not the same thing. One teaches strength. The other teaches dependence. "I can't fix this." The words left my mouth calmly. Jian nodded. "I know." Another surprise. Then I added, "But I can tell you something." He looked up. I held his gaze. "Stop looking for someone to save your company." Silence. Then, "Save yourself." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly nodded. This time, genuinely. Not because he agreed. Because he finally understood. Some lessons require consequences before they become visible. The investigation reached its turning point 2 weeks later. Not because we found new evidence. Because someone else did. A journalist. Her name was Tang Rue. 32 years old. Relentless. Intelligent. Dangerously persistent. She contacted me unexpectedly. Not through official channels. Not through the foundation. Directly. The meeting took place in a quiet restaurant near the river. The moment she sat down, I knew she already suspected something. Good journalists often do. She didn't waste time. "You're investigating Long River Foundation." Not a question. A statement. I looked at her. "Why would you think that?" She smiled slightly. "Because someone has been moving old records." "Interesting. Very interesting." I said nothing. She continued. "For years, nobody touched those archives." She folded her hands. Then suddenly multiple people became interested. The implication hung in the air. Someone was watching. Someone had noticed movement. I remained careful. "What do you want?" Her answer came immediately. "The truth." Most people say that. Very few mean it. I studied her for several seconds. Then asked, "And if the truth destroys powerful people?" She didn't hesitate. "Then the truth isn't what destroyed them." A familiar thought. One my father would have appreciated. One I understood now. Truth does not create damage. It reveals where damage already exists. The conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end, I trusted her enough to share limited information. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to begin. Enough to prepare. Enough to ensure that if something happened to me, the story wouldn't disappear. My father had worked alone for too long. I wouldn't repeat that mistake. Something else changed during those weeks. Something quieter. Something more important. For the first time since finding the archive, I stopped living entirely in the past. At Lin Mayu's suggestion, I began volunteering at one of the few community programs my father had genuinely supported. A small educational center. Nothing glamorous. Nothing powerful. just people trying to help children from struggling families. At first I resisted. I had investigations, evidence, questions, responsibilities, but eventually I went. And unexpectedly, I stayed. The center occupied an old building near the outskirts of the city. The paint was fading, the furniture mismatched, the budget limited. Yet every afternoon the rooms filled with energy. Children studying, teachers helping, volunteers laughing, life moving forward. Simple, honest, human. One evening, after finishing a tutoring session, I sat alone in an empty classroom. Sunlight filtered through the windows. Dust drifted lazily through the air. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about corruption, or betrayal, or death. I was simply present. The realization caught me off guard. For years, my identity had been built around obligation. Being useful, being reliable, being needed. Now I was discovering something different. Purpose and sacrifice are not the same thing. One nourishes, the other consumes. The distinction changed everything. The final evidence arrived unexpectedly. Not through investigation, not through journalism, not through luck, through Sue Rome, the missing founder, the vanished witness, the ghost haunting every stage of this story. He contacted us himself. A handwritten letter arrived at the warehouse. No return address, no explanation, just a single envelope. Inside was a note, and a key, another key. My pulse accelerated immediately. The note contained only one sentence. You already have the truth. This opens the proof. Nothing more. No signature. None needed. Lin Mayu recognized the handwriting instantly. Sue Rome. My heart pounded. Proof. Not evidence. Proof. The difference mattered. We followed instructions hidden inside the envelope. The key led to a private storage facility, then to a secured locker, then to a sealed container. And inside, everything. Original incorporation documents, identity records, private correspondence, signed statements, audio recordings, photographs, the complete history, unedited, untouched, undeniable. 14 years of secrets collapsed in a single afternoon. For a long time, neither Lin Mayu nor I spoke, because there was nothing left to debate, nothing left to question, nothing left to discover. The truth stood complete, solid, permanent, ready. The feeling surprised me. I expected triumph, vindication, satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired, deeply tired, not physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that follows a long storm. The kind that arrives when carrying something heavy for too long. Lin Mayu noticed. You should be happy. I smiled faintly. Maybe. She studied me, then nodded, because she understood. This had never been about winning. It had never been about revenge. It had never even been about exposing Lu Jun. Not really. It was about finishing something my father couldn't. And now that task was nearly complete. The weight was finally beginning to leave my shoulders. A week later, Tang Rue published the first article, then the second, then the third, each one carefully documented, carefully verified, impossible to dismiss. The city reacted immediately. Questions emerged. Investigations opened. Board members panicked. Donors demanded answers. Government auditors appeared. For years, Long River Foundation had enjoyed unquestioned trust. Now scrutiny had arrived. And scrutiny is rarely kind to institutions built on secrets. Meanwhile, I remained largely invisible. Intentionally, the story didn't belong to me. It belonged to the truth. My role was simply ensuring it survived. Nothing more. Peace begins when winning stops mattering. For the first time in a very long while, I understood what that meant. 3 days later, my mother visited the educational center. Unexpectedly, I found her standing in the courtyard after classes ended. Children ran past laughing. She watched them quietly, then looked at me. You seem different. I smiled. So do you. A faint laugh escaped her. Neither of us discussed the investigation. Neither of us discussed the letter. Neither of us discussed old wounds. Some conversations happen without words. This was one of them. Eventually, she looked toward the setting sun, then spoke softly. Your father will be proud of you. The sentence landed harder than expected. because it was the one thing I never realized I still wanted to hear. For several moments, I couldn't answer. Then finally, "I hope so." She nodded, and together we watched the evening settle over the city. Not healed, not entirely, but moving forward at last. Yet even as peace began taking root, one final chapter remained unfinished. Because Lu Jun had still not spoken, and sooner or later, the request arrived on a gray morning. No lawyers, no intermediaries, no threats disguised as courtesy. Just a handwritten note delivered directly to my apartment. Inside were 12 words. "I would like to speak before everything ends. Lu Jun." I stared at the paper for a long time. Outside, rain drifted softly against the windows. The city had spent weeks unraveling. Every day brought another revelation, another audit, another resignation, another article. Long River Foundation no longer controlled the narrative. The truth controlled it now. And truth is a poor servant. It obeys nobody. The note rested on my table. Simple, direct, unexpected. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted answers. Not evidence. Not confessions. Answers. There is a difference. Evidence proves what happened. Answers explain why. After a long silence, I picked up my phone. "I'll meet him." The meeting took place in a quiet tea house overlooking the river. Not the expensive kind frequented by executives. Not the private clubs where influence hides. Just an old building with wooden floors and aging furniture. The kind of place where people come to remember things. When I arrived, Lu Jun was already waiting. For the first time, he looked old. Not weak. Not broken. Simply old. The public image had disappeared. No photographers. No assistants. No carefully managed appearances. Just a man nearing the end of a long story. He looked up as I entered, then nodded toward the empty chair. "Thank you for coming." I sat. Neither of us touched the tea. For nearly a minute, silence occupied the table. Finally he spoke. "You look like your father." The sentence surprised me. Not because it was unusual, because it sounded sincere. I studied him carefully. People keep saying that. A faint smile appeared. Because it's true. His gaze drifted toward the river beyond the windows. For several moments he said nothing. Then, I hated him. The honesty startled me. Not because of the words. Because of how calmly he said them. No anger. No bitterness. Only truth. The kind people discover when pretending no longer serve a purpose. "You hated my father." "Yes." Silence. Then he continued. "I also respected him." I leaned back slightly. The contradiction interested me. Lu Jun noticed. He couldn't be bought. The older man's eyes remained fixed on the water. He couldn't be frightened. Another pause. He couldn't be convinced that a useful lie was better than a painful truth. For the first time, I understood something important. Lu Jun wasn't describing my father. He was describing the obstacle, the one thing he could never control. Integrity. The room remained quiet. Eventually, I asked the question that had followed me for months. "Did you kill him?" Lu Jun looked at me, directly, for a long time, then shook his head. "No." The answer came immediately, without hesitation, without calculation. I believed he believed it. Whether that made it true was another matter. What happened then? His shoulders lowered slightly. The posture of a man carrying something heavy for too many years. He got too close. Not an answer. Not enough. He knew that. I created the lie about Hongwu Wei. There it was. At last. The beginning. The truth. My father discovered it. Yes. Then what? Lu Jun closed his eyes briefly. When people build their lives around deception, exposure becomes a form of death. The sentence lingered. Then he opened his eyes again. I tried to stop him. Silence. I failed. His voice remained calm. Too calm. The calmness frightened me more than anger would have. Because it sounded practiced. Rehearsed. A truth repeated privately for years. What happened after that? The older man looked away. Toward the river. Toward memory. Toward consequences. I wasn't the only person involved. A chill moved through me. Of course. Power rarely belongs to one person. Corruption rarely belongs to one person. Fear rarely belongs to one person. I never ordered his death. The words emerged quietly. I never wanted that. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, "Do you regret it?" The question seemed to surprise him. Not because it was difficult, because nobody had asked it. Not journalists, not auditors, not investigators. Regret isn't a legal matter. It's a human one. Lu Zhan stared into his untouched tea. Finally, he nodded. Every day, the answer arrived without drama, without performance, without tears, which somehow made it feel more real. When the meeting ended, neither of us shook hands. Neither of us exchanged forgiveness. Neither of us found peace. That isn't how life works. Some damage remains damage. Some losses remain losses. Some graves remain full. As I stood to leave, Lu Zhen spoke one final time. Wei. I stopped. He looked older than ever. Smaller somehow. Not physically. Spiritually. The collapse of a lie takes weight with it. Sometimes the liar. Sometimes the audience. Sometimes both. Your father would have hated what this became. I nodded. Yes. Then I added. He would have hated what it did to you too. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Lu Zhen's face. Not grief. Not shame. Something more complicated. Recognition. Then I left, and neither of us looked back. The official investigations continued for months. One by one, the pieces fell. Executives resigned. Records surfaced. Testimony emerged. Auditors confirmed what evidence had already suggested. The public learned the truth. Not every detail. Not every secret. But enough. Enough for history to correct itself. Enough for names to return. Enough for the dead to stop carrying blame meant for the living. Long River Foundation survived. Changed. Smaller. Different. But alive. Which felt strangely appropriate. Because institutions, like people, sometimes deserve a second chance. Only after the truth. Never before it. Jin changed too. Slowly. Painfully. Authentically. His company never recovered. Not fully. The collapse cost him nearly everything. Money. Status. Pride. Illusions. Yet strangely enough, losing those things seemed to help him. For the first time in his life, he built something himself. Small. Modest. Sustainable. Without shortcuts. Without borrowed credibility. Without expecting someone else to absorb the risk. One evening, he visited the educational center. The same place where I now spent most of my time. Children filled the classrooms. Laughter drifted through open windows. Life. Simple life. Jian watched quietly, then turned toward me. I understand now. I smiled faintly. Understand what? His eyes lowered. How much you carried. The words struck harder than any apology. Because they weren't an apology. They were recognition. The thing I had wanted for years. The thing I stopped expecting. The thing that arrived only after I no longer needed it. We stood together in silence. Brothers. Not fixed. Not perfect. But honest. And honesty was enough. Months later, I returned to the warehouse one final time. The archive remained exactly as I remembered. Dust. Boxes. Records. Memories. The first key rested in my hand. The key hidden inside my father's letter. The key that changed everything. I walked slowly through the room. Past photographs. Past evidence. Past grief. At the far end stood the cabinet containing my father's final letter. The real one. The one meant for me. I opened it carefully. Read the words again. Not because I needed answers. Because I wanted to hear his voice. The sentence that stayed with me most wasn't about truth. Or courage. Or sacrifice. It was something simpler. You owe nobody your life. For years, I misunderstood responsibility. I thought love meant carrying people. Saving people. Enduring anything. Giving endlessly. My father understood something I didn't. Love offered freely is a gift. Love demanded endlessly is a debt trap. The lesson arrived late. But arrived. And that was enough. I folded the letter. Returned it carefully. Then locked the cabinet for the final time. Not because I was abandoning the past. Because I no longer needed to live inside it. A year after the investigation ended, the city unveiled a new plaque at the Foundation headquarters. No ceremony, no speeches, no spectacle, just corrected history. 4 names, all founders recognized equally, including my father, including Su Rong, including Han Wei, The truth finally occupying the space where lies once stood. I visited alone, read the names, touched the engraved letters, then smiled. Not triumph, not victory, something quieter. Completion. The story no longer belonged to me. It belonged to history now, and history could carry itself. That evening I left the city, not because I was running away, not because I was angry, not because I couldn't forgive. Forgiveness and distance are not opposites. People often confuse them. You can understand someone without returning. You can release resentment without reopening doors. You can wish people well from far away. I drove toward the coast, toward a smaller life, toward meaningful work, toward peace. The educational network had expanded. Several communities needed help. For the first time, my future wasn't built around fixing damage. It was built around creating something healthy. The difference felt enormous. The ocean appeared on the horizon just as the sun began setting. Golden light stretched across the water. The road ahead remained open, wide, uncertain, alive. I rolled down the window. The wind carried salt and possibility. Behind me remained grief, betrayal, secrets, inheritance, truth. Ahead remained everything else. A life not defined by what had been taken. A life not controlled by what had burned. A life my father would recognize. And perhaps, if I was lucky, a life he would be proud of. Some people think closure means getting everything back. They're wrong. Closure is learning you no longer need it. The letter had burned. The legacy survived. And in the end, the greatest inheritance my father left me wasn't evidence. It wasn't truth. It wasn't even justice. It was permission. Permission to stop carrying what was never mine. Permission to leave. Permission to live. And this time, I did.